A divorce judge can divide your life, but not your debt.
On paper, the debt was assigned. In reality, the liability never moved. And by the time most people figure that out, it's already too late.
Hello, welcome back to Give Me Credit. I'm J.S. Waldo, author of Mortgage Lending Explained, and our credit guru is John Mackey, author of Credit Genius. You can find us both on Substack. And today we're talking about something, almost nobody really thinks about or understands. John, we've talked about credit, we've talked about debt collection, but today we're talking about what happens when divorce collides with both.
Yeah, and because I don't know as much about it as I should, I've invited a friend of mine, dear friend of mine, as our guest today. And it's my pleasure to introduce David Cox, an experienced attorney and owner of Two Rivers Law, based in the Twin Cities area here of Minnesota. Now, surprisingly, he's 56. He doesn't look it. He looks like not a day over 40, but he brings decades of professional and life experience to his practice, paired with an energy and presence that often suggests otherwise. Now, Mr. Cox is focused primarily on family law, including divorce and related matters. He earned his Juris Doctorate from the University of Minnesota Law School in 2004, graduating cum laude, and previously received his undergraduate degree from the University of Minnesota, graduating magna cum laude. His core practices area are family law, criminal defense, civil and contract disputes in real estate, and estate law. And he is known for the pick the right fights philosophy, because you don't want to be taking everybody to court, pushing settlement when practical, but litigating aggressively when needed.
Welcome, David Cox. How are you today?
I'm great, JS. Thank you so much for having me on, and John, you as well. It's a pleasure to be here.
Thank you.
Excellent. Thank you for coming. We really appreciate it. We're going to dive right in, if you don't mind. When clients walk into your office at the beginning of the divorce, do most of them believe that the divorce decree will also separate their financial obligations with lenders?
And let me build on that. But I'm sorry, David, you take it away here and answer that.
So yeah, I think that clients generally understand that that's going to be part of the process. They understand they have debts, and we have to sort out who's going to be responsible for them, and that's definitely a big part of any divorce. I don't know that they've necessarily thought about it in detail, and I think they probably have a lot of assumptions about it. But I think they come to me asking about debts, and we talk about what debts there are and who's going to pay them and how we're going to arrange for that.
Mm-hmm.
So do you typically discuss credit reports, credit scores, and even potential debt collection actions down the road? Or is that something outside the scope of what most attorneys advise?
Yeah, I would say that's probably, mostly outside of our scope. I don't necessarily talk about credit reports. Now, some attorneys will ask you for your credit report and or the other side's credit report to identify your debts, to discover any, potentially unknown or undisclosed debts and that sort of thing. But no, I don't think we talk necessarily much about credit scores. Now, that said, I am concerned with my client's credit. Particularly where, she's jointly obligated on a mortgage or on a car loan, things like that, when her spouse is keeping that asset. Ensuring that the client gets released from that liability, if possible, is important. And, we try to put mechanisms in place to do that, especially when it comes to, ensuring a mortgage gets, either assumed or refinanced. We want an agreement and or an order of the court for a forced sale of the asset to, satisfy the debt in the event that it's not paid.
Okay.
So David,
Go
I'm
ahead.
sorry, John.
Go ahead.
Timing wise, when do you feel that people find out about the credit consequences? Before the agreement is signed, or only after problems start showing up?
Well, we talk about those issues, first, most certainly before the agreement is signed. We're talking about making sure that the client gets, released from big debts like mortgages and vehicle loans. That's all part of the settlement process, is coming to an agreement, about those issues. And so we're doing that before the agreement is signed, because, the release and how and when the other party is going to accomplish that is going to be an important part of the agreement. It's also a big part of the process to identify credit cards and other debts and, specify which party is responsible for paying them.
Okay. Most people assume once a judge assigns a debt, the issue is settled. But from a legal standpoint, why doesn't a divorce decree change the original contract with the creditor?
Okay. All right. Well, I think that this is an easy misunderstanding to have. Well, the judge says he has to pay it, so I don't have to pay it now, right? And that's not how it works. The way I try to explain it to clients is, this divorce is between you and your spouse. Okay, the bank doesn't care what you and your spouse agreed to, or what the court ordered you to do or your spouse to do. If the court orders your ex to pay some credit card debt and he doesn't pay it, that's not the bank's problem. Or if you're the one that signed that note, or you signed that credit card agreement, and you promised that this third party creditor that you would repay a debt, they have a right to enforce that agreement. And I think this really goes to in part of it might even be your next question, the question of jurisdiction.
Yeah, that's exactly the next question. Please explain that.
Yeah.
Does a divorce judge have the authority, to remove someone from a credit contract they signed?
No, the court does not. Court does not have that authority. I mean, again, a divorce is a lawsuit between you and your spouse to determine, your rights to assets and your responsibility for liabilities. But the court doesn't have the authority or the jurisdiction to change the rights of creditors and other third parties who are not parties to this lawsuit. I mean, yeah, so, you and your spouse can agree, and the court can order that one of you and not the other will be responsible for payment of a debt. And as between the two of you, that's fine. Your agreement and the court's order is binding on you, but the court can't change the rights of other persons in your divorce. And if you think about it, of course, that's how it works. JS, suppose you loan me some money and I agree to pay you back, and then John and I go to court next month and we agree I'm not liable for it. He's going to pay it, right? And how is that fair? Especially when John doesn't pay you,
right?
So
I'm never divorcing either of you.
Right? Let's not do that. Let's stay together.
Okay.
Do most couples really understand that family court divides responsibility, but the credit system still enforces the original agreement?
I think so. I guess I don't know. When those issues come up, it's my job to explain that to them,
Right.
That's great that your husband was ordered to pay this bill, but he's not. So, now we have to deal with that. Here's your options.
Mm-hmm.
Well, and I think sometimes people get so confused going through the process. One's hurt, one may not be hurt. Going through the process, they're listening, but they're really not hearing. So that's why why I asked that question. And this is where most people realize that the divorce didn't change the system, it just exposed it. Is that right?
It's one way to look at it, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. Okay. So I actually have experience with this. So some of these questions may feel a little, like we're asking the same thing, but we're trying to get into the depth of this. As a mortgage underwriter, I've dealt with this issue a lot. So let's say a debt is assigned to one spouse.
Mm-hmm.
In your experience, what happens when payments stop? Why does the credit system still impact both people?
Well, because presumably, both people signed that mortgage note, or maybe if it's a credit card, they both signed that credit card agreement. And so even though the court has said, husband has to pay it, from the bank's perspective, they have a contract with both husband and wife, and they're allowed to pursue both husband and wife in the event payment's not made.
Let me ask you a quick question. Are you in a community property state?
No, that's a great question. We are in a marital property state, and I should be honest and say, I'm not exactly sure what all the differences are between community property and marital property states. I've never had to address that. But Minnesota, where I practice, is what's called a marital property state.
Okay, excellent. I think that's important to make that divide. Having underwritten in both, it definitely, there is a difference in how we look at this. However, as far as the credit report is concerned, it's the same, no matter what.
Okay.
Yeah.
So,
I would suspect that's the case. Yeah.
yeah.
I don't know all the states that are marital, and who's not. However, I did have cases through my credit reporting and debt collection stuff that I did. With the states out west is what I was concerned about. I think the state of Washington is community.
Pretty sure California is too.
Yes.
California, Arizona, New Mexico, Nevada, it goes on.
Yeah. That's
I think there's a list of 7 of us.
Okay. Is it possible for someone's credit score to collapse even when they're following the divorcing order exactly?
Unfortunately, yeah. It happens all the time. You have a credit card, and maybe you put the dishwasher on it and, household expenses, paid for food on it, whatever. And then you get divorced, and the way it shakes out is, your spouse gets ordered to pay it. Right. And so you don't pay it, right? Because they're ordered to pay it.
Right.
And then they don't. Right. Well, like we've been saying, bank doesn't care about that. Right. Bank says my contract's with you. And if you don't pay it, we're going to report that to your credit. And so what ends up happening is you've got this sort of not very great option to remedy the situation. I mean, if you want to protect your credit, somebody's got to pay that bill. And so you have the right to pay the debt that your ex was ordered to pay. Then, that's great. So now you're paying his debts, right? That sucks. But you do have and the remedy isn't so great either. You have the right to sue your ex for contribution and indemnity. Meaning I've paid a debt that you're legally liable for, and I'm entitled to a judgment against you, to repay me. But frankly, it's not a great option. I mean, if your ex can't pay the creditor, they probably can't pay you. And don't want to, and getting money out of someone who doesn't want to pay is a lot harder than you might think. Which, potentially is a subject for a future podcast: how to collect on a judgment and what are your rights as a judgment debtor.
That's interesting. That's interesting.
So,
I was going to say one thing I wanted to make clear. I have some notes about this. We've said that, a divorce is between you and your spouse, and, the bank doesn't care, whether, who was ordered to pay it. I mean, this goes both ways. If your spouse is the one who's liable on a credit card, they're the ones that signed the credit agreement, not you, right? And then, you get divorced. The divorce decree can't make you liable to that creditor if you weren't liable to them in the first place. This goes both ways. They can't do that. Yeah. I mean, and I think this is something that's important for people to understand is that, the court, as far as third parties are concerned, the court can't make you liable to this third party anymore that it can strip that third party of their rights under a contract with you. So for example,
except if you're in a community property state, I do have to interject that here. If you're married when your spouse signs that contract,
okay.
it is now yours. If you're not married, if it's before or after the divorce, you're not. But if it's during the marriage, you are.
Interesting.
Yeah, and that's an important thing to understand. That creditor can actually put a lien on your title, say if you have a house, or even go after you collection wise. So it's important to just understand. Now there's only 7 states, so the majority of the people won't be affected by that comment, but I just want to interject that here. I've seen it disrupt many mortgages.
Wow. Well, that's a great distinction to make. And I wasn't aware of that. Like I said, I've never practiced in a community property state.
Yeah, no worries. And I'm not an attorney. It's just something I've experienced as an underwriter.
Well, folks, watch out for that then. If you're in a community property state, that's you've
that's
got
a big
that
one.
issue. In a marital property state, though, nope. That's not how it works. I mean, as far as the creditor and its rights are concerned, that creditor's contract is with him, and they have the right to collect from him, but not you. And that's true even if the divorce decree says you have to pay the debt.
Mm-hmm. And that's an important thing. That's actually a beautiful thing. I wish it were that way everywhere.
Yeah. So I just wanted to, make sure that I covered that because I thought that was something people might want.
That's important. Yeah. Thank you.
Okay.
John, did you have a question?
Well, I don't know if I had a question or a statement, but in my age and status, I forgot it. So let's just move on. If a joint debt goes unpaid and ends up in collections, can a debt collector still sue both ex-spouses?
Yeah. Yes. I mean, again, we're assuming. Well, we're in a marital property state. We're assuming both spouses, are, have signed up to be responsible for this debt. But, yeah, I mean, the collection company that bought the debt has the same right to collect it as the original creditor. I mean, as John knows, of course, they have to prove that the debt exists. They have to prove that they rightfully own it. But provided they do, they have the same rights as the original creditor had to collect.
Yeah, yeah. That's interesting.
So if that turns into a judgment, let's go take it the next start. It's not just in collection anymore. It turns into a judgment. Is it possible for the other spouse to have their wages garnished, even though the court said they weren't responsible?
Well, yeah. I assume that we're talking about
marital.
First of all, the creditor or the collection agency getting a judgment, right?
Correct.
And then it depends on who they get the judgment against. If both spouses signed that credit agreement, or again, in a community property state, if the debt was, incurred during the marriage, I guess, they can sue both spouses. And yeah, if they get a judgment against you, they can take that judgment and go through a bunch of legal steps to garnish your wages.
Yeah.
Unbelievable.
Yeah, it's important to think about it though. Let's talk about what happens though. Like years later, how often, David, we're just going to kind of lean back onto your experience here. How often do you see someone stuck on a mortgage because the refinancing never happened? The judge ordered it, but the person who got the home and the court order said refinance this. How often, and again, years later, how often does that come back and you see it?
Well, it does happen. I mean, we've had clients with, credit problems, down the road that, because that were caused by their spouse's, failure to refinance as agreed or as ordered. I mean, there's a thing that I think a lot of people don't understand. Just because a court orders you to do something, doesn't mean you're going to do it. The court can't make you pay that money or make you sign that, refinancing. You can be ordered to do it, but doesn't mean it's actually going to happen. And so that's why when my clients get divorced, and particularly where my client is moving out and the ex is getting the house, first thing we're going to say is, okay, how are you going to get my client off this mortgage? How are you going to get my client released from her, responsibility on this mortgage so that her credit is not affected, so that she has the credit to go get her own mortgage down the line.
Right.
What are we going to do? And the second part of that is, if that's the situation you're in, you want to make sure your lawyer is is getting further agreements as well about what happens if we don't refinance within that period of time. Specifically, we're gonna have an agreement, and we're gonna have the court order that the house will be refinanced within, let's say, 6 months, and if it's not, then the house is going to be sold. And we can even put a bunch of additional rules beyond that to really give it teeth and make sure the house actually does get sold. But that's how you want to handle it.
Does a client have the right, let's say, I hope I can phrase this right, can a ex-spouse check on the payments that their ex-spouse has been court ordered to pay? Can they check on them in advance to make sure that they don't go 30, 60, 90 days late?
Well, I think that would be a question more for the creditor. I mean, if the debt is, if I'm the one that signed up for the debt, right? It's my credit card, right? And
Right.
my ex gets ordered to pay it. Of course, it's my account. I can access my account and see it.
Right.
But if not, I suppose not.
Yeah, and if it's joint, I mean, that's easy because it's joint, so they have the right to check on anything. But if it's not joint, that's, like you said, David, that's where, like, okay, how would you do that? You don't have a
Okay, I think that clarifies it for me. So the joint debt, because both started it, even though the court order says that another person pays it, doesn't mean that you still can't check on it because you were part of the process that started that debt.
Yeah.
Right.
I mean, it kind of goes back to even what we say, John. Check that credit report, annualcreditreport.com. Now, you don't want to check that credit report and see, oh my gosh, there's a missed payment. But if it's joint, you might want to stay on top of it beforehand.
Right. Okay. How often do people confuse authorized borrower, joint borrower, cosigner? And maybe how does that affect them later?
Well, I confuse those things all the time. It's confusing. Right?
It is.
Those things, like, what does all that mean? I mean, I know, of course I do though. Yeah, it's an easy thing to get confused. I don't know that those distinctions, come to light much in the divorce process, other than, the question of, who's liable for this debt, right? Co-signers and joint borrowers, those persons have, signed the credit agreement that,
Right.
they've agreed that I'm going to be liable for this debt. An authorized user, though, I don't, maybe not. And John, you might know more about that than I do, frankly. But I would think an authorized user just means I'm taking out this credit card. I'm responsible for the debt, but I'm going to allow JS to charge on this card as well and have a card sent to her.
Correct.
Yeah. So I think in that situation, then,
Now, JS would not be responsible for the debt. I would
right.
be.
At least in,
However, it would show on my credit report, and it could affect my credit score.
Mm.
But I
So
think you could also remove yourself as an authorized user.
you absolutely can, because you never signed the agreement, but it still could affect you. And I think that's really what this all comes down to, is that as an underwriter, I have a lot of insight into the divorce debt situation. But the
Right.
bottom line is it still affects your score.
Right.
Hmm.
And in this day and age, everything is dependent upon your score. It's
Yeah.
still important, and that's why I want to talk about this.
No, I think it's important. So David, I'm going to jump into the next question because I'm very curious, when you're in the process, what happens when one spouse opened accounts the other didn't even know about, and then those show up at the divorce? How does the system decide responsibly?
Yeah. Well, first of all, a lot can be said about this topic.
Mhm.
And so I'll just start off by saying, if I start going off on some tangent that you're not interested in, you tell me, and snap me back to
Oh, I will. That's my job. But you
right
go.
on.
Please go.
Good. Yeah, and this happens all the time, and it can be a real mess. And it's funny, my notes reflect that we need to be talking about marital property states here. Community
Yes.
property might be different.
Don't worry about community. You go ahead.
All right. So, I think maybe we start with the concept of what is marital property.
Hmm.
Uh, Marital property is a concept where the law assumes, or in a marital property state, the law assumes, or starts at least with the presumption, that everything the married couple owns is owned by them jointly. Okay. The law doesn't care, who bought it, who didn't, who worked, who didn't, who's on the title, who's not, who stayed at home eating bonbons and who, did all the work. None of that matters. The law starts with the presumption that it belongs to both of you jointly.
Okay.
Okay. And that goes for both, assets and liabilities. Okay. Now, we start with the presumption that everything is going to be considered marital, but either party is permitted to say, no, this is my non-marital property. This is mine, not ours. Or that's your non-marital debt. That's your problem, not our problem. And, how do we do that? When it comes to assets, there's lots of ways you show something is non-marital, but the two big ones are, one, I owned this before the marriage, right? Or I can trace it back directly to something I owned before the marriage. And the other one is, this was a gift or an inheritance from my uncle Bob.
Right.
It was those sorts of things are non-marital. They're mine, not ours. But I think what you guys are most concerned with is, what about debts, right? Well, if a debt was contracted prior to the marriage, you got a fair argument that it's non-marital. And even if it was acquired during the marriage, you can say, look, that's your non-marital debt, right? You were buying, household supplies and paying on appliances or whatever, buying things that benefit the marriage. You were buying plane tickets for you and your secret girlfriend and staying, and whatever, doing things outside the marriage, So you can claim that those are non-marital debts. But coming back to the original question, just because you didn't know about the card or the debt or whatever doesn't mean you're not responsible for paying it, at least as between you and your spouse. You may not know that your spouse was charging up on that credit card, but if they were using it for, ostensibly marital purposes, at least in the divorce, you're on the hook for it. And it's hard to prove that it's not a marital debt. What are you going to do? You get 5 years of credit card statements. You're going to go over it line by line and argue about every single charge on that, on these bills. It's hard to do. Yeah.
That makes sense.
Yeah.
Okay. So before a divorce is finalized, I think we may have already talked about this, but what the hell, I'll ask it again. I got a short memory. Do most clients fully understand that the divorce decree divides responsibility but not liability to the creditor?
I think that's a valid question, David. I think that really what he's asking is this something that as a divorce attorney, do you counsel on this?
Probably not as much as we should, or at least I'll speak for myself. Maybe not as much as I should. That's the question itself sort of enlightens me that maybe I need to, make sure clients understand that. I mean, I think a lot of them do. But you're right. This is something that's worth saying out loud to people, to make sure that they understand it, at least in cases where, those liabilities could be an issue.
Yeah, I think where we're coming from, of course, we are all about financial education here. So in your opinion, would it be fair to say, well, I think we've established this, but let's just state it. There are really two systems happening at the same time, right? Mm-hmm. You have the family court dividing responsibility. Then you have the credit system enforcing contracts. And those systems don't talk to each other. Actually, they don't even care what either one says. And I think that's really the point we're driving at here. So you just made a statement that you said you think that most people know this, and I'm going to kind of be the devil's advocate here and say to you, well, then why do they need people like us? Because what we find is that most consumers don't know. They truly believe that that piece of paper that this judge on the family side, the family court side, rules. It was a judge. I mean, it's the legal system, right?
Right.
So I guess we come back to the same comment. Do you really think people understand that?
Maybe think is the wrong word. Maybe thought is the better word. Because, your experience with that's going to be, much more telling than mine, and it sounds to me like that's what you're hearing from clients is, I didn't realize that I, couldn't possibly be held liable for this because the judge said he had to pay it. Right.
I think
have you ever had people come back to you after a divorce and say, well, we have this court order. What do we do now?
Yeah. Yes, although I don't think the issue was, I didn't understand that they could flake out on this. That it was more like, what am I going to do now? They flaked out on this,
Right.
And we talk about options. But no, I appreciate this line of questioning because I think it's telling me that, in cases where I've got, substantial debts, I need to be talking to clients to make sure they understand that. Because every now and then, you get this case. They're the toughest cases where, the parties just don't really have a lot of assets. Maybe they don't own real estate and they don't have a lot of money, and what they have is a pile of credit card debt. And those are tough cases, to resolve. And I think you're right. I think in those kind of cases, I should be talking to my clients to make sure they understand that just because the judge, if this is your card and he's ordered to pay it,
right.
Better keep an eye on it.
Yeah. Now, without naming names, can you walk us through a real case where something came back years later?
Yeah. The only ones that come to mind, the only one that I've been thinking about it, and I haven't had a whole lot of cases where, when we're just talking about like sort of consumer debt, that just hasn't happened that often. I mean, I did have a client just recently, or it's actually my wife's friend's daughter. So not even a client, but they came in and she was in that boat. They actually weren't even married, but she had co-signed for this guy's truck and she'd co-signed for his credit cards. And this guy was like, "Oh yeah, this is great,"
Yeah, love is blind.
Yes. And I'm not going to hold it against her because, right? Love is blind.
Right.
We all think it's going to work out. Well, It didn't work out. And this guy, ran away, took his truck, left the credit cards. And she's like, "Oh my God, the creditors are coming after me. What am I going to do?" And I said, "You're going to get your credit ruined, or you can pay them yourself and we'll go sue the guy and we'll see what we get, I mean, we already have a piece of paper saying he owes it to you. Now you're going to go get another piece of paper that says he owes it to you. And, you got to decide if you want to do that."
What did she decide to do?
She decided to pay him, just eat it, basically. Yeah. Yeah. Because she figured in her opinion, this guy was what we call judgment proof, meaning go ahead, get your judgment. I don't have anything. You can't.
Everything I make is cash.
Yeah. Yeah. Right. Yeah. I'm working for cash and, I don't have any money. You can't squeeze blood from a stone. So good luck to you, So,
I think
Yeah.
they were rephrased. It wasn't said like that.
No, he didn't actually say that, but that's the attitude is, go ahead, get your judgment. Good for you.
But was she surprised that she didn't have any recourse?
Yeah, she was, and there were some tears.
Yeah.
She was really sad, and I felt terrible. I wish I could have told her something different, but that's.
We're coming to a close, David, and I'm really grateful you're here. I want to make a point very clear to everybody, and this is very important before we close this out. If you go through a divorce and there's a mortgage and it's joint, and you decide it's time to go buy another property, and the payments were made and everything's fine, they're doing what they agreed to do, the mortgage system will not count that debt against you if you have the legal document, which is the judge signed divorce decree stating that it's not yours. But the point we're trying to make here is that things can go wrong. And the fact is, if it's joint and you're on it and they miss a payment, even two, and then they catch up, that's great, but it affects your credit score.
Yeah.
So if someone's listening and knows divorce might be coming, what are the 3 financial steps they should take immediately, David? I'm asking you this, to protect their credit and their future borrowing ability.
That's a tough question, and it's hard to protect yourself, right? Because you're in it already. You already have that mortgage. You already, those credit cards are already out there. But I think what you want to do, if you see it coming, what I tell people, first thing to do is secure the information, get the statements, look in the mail, find, dig. Is there a filing cabinet? Is there a place where the bills are kept? Man, you go digging through that stuff, you make copies and you find out what's in there, because you might, well, one, we're going to need it for the divorce. And 2, they might not share. And 3, you need to know this, right? You just need to know it just generally. So I would say the most important thing you can do is try to secure the information, and find out what's out there as soon as you can.
And in this day and age, with everything being electronic and, paper statements not coming, is there a way for somebody, if let's say I came to you and I was like, okay, we're getting a divorce. Here's my credit report. Can we get a copy of his credit report or hers, whatever the case may be?
Well, you can. You definitely can. I mean, once the divorce is started, right?
Okay.
You would hope that they would just willingly provide it, right? And you don't have to, go to court and get a court order or something, right? But
right.
But if they don't, yeah, your lawyer can make them do it. It's a process called discovery, where each party, serves demands on the other for documents and information. And yeah, it actually happens a lot. I get requests, and sometimes I send them I need a copy of your credit report.
Oh, thank you so much for that. This is great information. So again, we're going to get to the point where we're going to close this out. What you're really saying is divorce ends the relationship, but the contract never left. Right, John?
Yep. There you go.
This is how
Yeah.
your fully ascended production ready podcast. There we go. So here we are. And I think it's important that we end on a positive note. There is help available. David, you sound like you are a very, very informed attorney, and these are difficult situations. These are difficult topics, and I think a lot of people don't want to talk about them. And really, really do appreciate you coming on and answering these questions and talking about it. So thank you.
Yeah,
You're
David,
welcome.
you've been marvelous. I couldn't have expected any more.
Oh, thanks, John, and thanks, JS. Again, it was my
Yeah.
pleasure. And
And I'll buy you a cigar next time we see.
hey, I love it.
He owes you one from the Dominican Republic.
Oh,
Maybe I'll bring. Yeah, John. Maybe we'll see. I'll keep you in mind, my friend.
yeah, I bet you will. Okay.
Well, this has been Give Me Credit. Please like, subscribe, ring that bell. You know the drill. Follow along. In upcoming episodes, we have more guests, and they're going to be sharing their knowledge in all things credit like this. You won't want to miss those. Also, feel free to send us questions and comments. We invite your input on topics. What would you like us to cover? Is there more? Should we have David back? I vote yes. I'm J.S. Waldo, author of Mortgage Lending Explained, and our credit guru again is John Mackey, author of Credit Genius. This is David Cox, our esteemed guest and attorney. You can find John and I, both of us, on Substack, and follow along there as well. And again, I want to thank you, David. John, thank you.
Thank you, guys. Thank you. Appreciate it.
Have a great day, everyone.
You too.
Thanks.